Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, where our goal is to help you live your best audacious life ever. And I'd like to welcome you to a special bonus edition of the podcast. And on this episode, and what makes it special is we're going to honor and show recognition to the fact that it's Black History Month here in Canada. You see, it was 25 years ago that a motion was put forth at the House of Commons, the federal government, to officially recognize February as Black History Month in Canada. And we have been celebrating it ever since. We're going to do our part here on the podcast by recognizing the three most audacious individuals in Canadian Black history. Their contributions have been plenty and significant, and it's part of the reason why we're taking this opportunity to highlight and profile these individuals. We're going to need some help in doing so. So I've asked Natasha Henry, who is the president of the Ontario Black History Society, to join us and help us in identifying these individuals. Like I said, the contributions have been significant, and they've made, many have made significant contributions to the Canadian landscape. So it's only fitting that we take this time and celebrate those achievements. Look, I just want to get into it, so without any further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Natasha Henry. It definitely will be a good one. Enjoy. Good afternoon, Natasha. How are you today?
I'm great, Ollie. How are you doing?
Wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast to sort of talk about audacious individuals in Ontario Black History Society history, if you will. So I thought maybe before we get into that, I wonder if you could just give some context and talk about the work of the Ontario Black History Society.
Sure. The Ontario Black History Society this year, we're entering our 43rd year as an organization. It started in 1978. And, family members, community members were concerned that their children were not learning enough about their Black and African roots, that this history was not being disseminated publicly. And so a number of people, including Daniel Hill and his wife and other community members, Wilson Brooks and others, came together to form the Ontario Black History Society. Some of the work that the Ontario Black History Society has done was help to advocate for official recognition of Black History Month, both municipally at the Toronto City of Toronto, the province of Ontario, and nationally as well. So that's some of the work, and we have programming, a range of programming, developed resources, and we continue this work through to today. Right. Because there continues to be a great need, as we see, as well as the interest. And so I'm honored to be serving as the president of the Ontario Black History Society. This is my 4th year, continuing in a long line of committed board members and staff in order to further this work.
And I think it's important we highlight the fact that we're in February, we're in Black History Month, but the work is year round, and perhaps the focus being, and this is the 25th year that Black History Month has been recognized in Canada, but the focus isn't just what happens in February, it's all year round. I think that's important to identify.
Absolutely. All year round. Again, our programming ranges from Emancipation Day commemorations in August. We have, this year we have speaker series, a virtual speaker series. We develop projects collaboratively with different organizations to develop resources that help, again, to raise awareness around Black Canadian history and to document that history as well. So absolutely 365.
One last question before we move on here, but how do you know that you're meeting your marker? What are your measures of success to know that you're achieving what you're after?
There are several things. There's this year the flood of inquiries for speakers virtually, for resources, for materials. So we know that there's an interest, and these requests this year, for example, have come from corporations, organizations, and so that's one. I really enjoy hearing from students and teachers. Our office get requests for, again, resources or for presentations. We get, notes from community members, just, from the general public, talking about how much they enjoyed our programming. And then there are, there's requests to work collaboratively with different organizations as well in order to further this work. So those are some of the things. And then of course you have the standards in terms of social media interaction and the followings, the viewership of our videos on our YouTube channel. So those are some of the ways that we gauge the interest, and it has just continued to grow exponentially this year.
Amazing, amazing. Well, we've seen over the last several months the interest in the history of Black peoples here in Canada has grown as well. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity for the organization to continue its great work. Let's talk about some audacious individuals in Black history, if we will. We've identified sort of three, if you will. Let's start off with your first one in terms of the most audacious.
And this is so difficult, let me tell you, to choose three people. So I'll do my best. I narrowed it down to three to try to cover a time range, a chronology, a little bit of a chronology of Black Canadian history. So the first person to me that stands out as an audacious person is a woman by the name of Bett. She was enslaved here in early Ontario. Records document her in about early as part as about 1812. And through those records and through my research, we learned that she was enslaved as well as her child, a little boy, and they were sold and were actually sold a couple of times. Then a few years later in 1818, she appears again in a runaway ad where Bett had run away from the following person who had enslaved her in Kingston area. And she ran away at the end of September, the last week of September, with a young child, a second young child that she had from the previous one. And in doing my research, her story has really stood out to me for several things. Looking at and acknowledging our history of enslavement here, and yes, understanding that as part of the forced condition of Black life, but more importantly, understanding her as a mother and as a woman. And I've thought about what it is that propelled her to run away at that time with a young baby. And if we think about the weather at the end of September, the first week of October, and thinking about the physical geography and what she had to navigate, right, the physical space, but also people in pursuit of her, but yet and still she made that decision to run away with her child, obviously in pursuit of freedom for both of them, and particularly for her baby. So that is one of the stories that has really resonated with me in my research through to today.
I'm so glad that you even touched on her role as a mother and a woman, because those are added challenges or burdens, if you will, in terms of when you talk about escaping. And at the time of year, I think it also is real. I'm glad that you highlighted that as well, because that adds to the pressure. So I think without question that audacious is right there.
Absolutely. So think about that fierceness and determination in order to make that decision and to execute it, right? That knowing the risks. And so that is definitely something that I think is audacious, in terms of our ancestors. The second person will also be a Black woman, very strong personality, and that is Ann Shadd Cary. She has been such an impactful historical actor. She was a woman who was born free into a family in Delaware, and a number of the family members, they immigrated here to Ontario. And, from the time that she arrived here, she was very much engaged in abolition activities and community building here. She started a school in Windsor, operating a private school to ensure that children, who were freedom seekers, as well as their parents, and just people in general, could receive an education. She started a newspaper, the very first newspaper published by a woman in North America, the second Black newspaper published here in Ontario. She published this newspaper, and she did all of this work along with traveling and speaking at a time where, the norms of the day really restricted women's engagement in the public space. She had frontmen, if you will, purporting to be editors of the newspaper, because that, alleviated some of those restrictions. And then one day in the newspaper, after responding to some letters, she just lets the cat out the bag, and she just says, "I'm the one who's the editor of the newspaper. So what is it that you have to say about women?" And, just again, for her to make that decision to say, I'm going to declare what I've been doing. That newspaper was instrumental, and it is an instrumental document in recording Black history, trying to connect families who were separated, who were fleeing slavery, engaging in the conversations around building Black community, mutual aid, building schools, encouraging people to vote. And so she was really a woman who was on time, ahead of her time, but also on time in terms of growing the Black community here.
Well, providing an education first, I mean, that on its own is a huge task. And so when you add the newspaper, I very much would have wondered what the response was when people found out who was behind it all, what that was, because again, she's not supposed to be. That's not her role, if you will. And she broke barriers and did show that she very well could do what she wanted to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And lastly,
The third person, and these are hard choices, as I said, but one of the persons who's resonating again with me this year in this conversation around Black History Month is Dudley Laws, and one of the founders of BATSI. And looking at the activism of and the leadership of Dudley Laws and BATSI in challenging systemic discrimination, police brutality, calling for accountability measures, calling for change. Those actions and that persistence and that perseverance really help to change the conversation and help to change for accountability as it relates to anti-Black racism, and definitely was a huge contribution in the wider movement for Black lives. And so, the work that they've done, that he's done, Dudley Laws, as well as, the organization, BATSI, all of those other members, the time that they've invested in that activism and in that work, and sometimes the personal toiling cost to them. And they did that, still knowing what was right, and continue with that. For me, that is a level of audacity that I admire, knowing that it's for the betterment and the improvement of our community.
Dudley dedicated his entire life. So when we talk about, and you touched on the dedication and commitment at risk of personal toil, he definitely did that his entire life, and really was for many growing up. I mean, myself in that, I put that in that category. Growing up to seeing actually activism in action, he was definitely that. And the first real memory would have to be Dudley Laws for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those are my three. Hard choice. There's so many others, and so I would always encourage people to read these stories. Check out Ontario Black History Society website, the Black Heritage sites. We have such a rich, deep, extensive history of people that we can celebrate and learn about every day.
Well, amazing. Natasha, I really appreciate you. And I put you on the spot there, limiting only three, and it was a tough task, but you certainly came through, and I appreciate that. And I encourage our listeners and our viewers that, it certainly doesn't stop here. It doesn't stop in the month of February. It's all year round. And certainly visiting the Ontario Black History Society website is a great starting point to educate yourself on the contributions by Black people here in Canada. So again, thank you, Natasha. This is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Aldi. Much appreciated. Have a great day.
And there you have it, folks. History's most audacious Black Canadians. Great list. I want to go back to something that we heard Natasha say during our chat, and I think it's very important that we reiterate, call it a disclaimer, if you will, but this isn't an exhaustive list. There have been so many Black Canadians who've made tremendous contributions and sacrifices, and many of them did so in a time where they didn't have a voice or weren't allowed to do so. So I would just, again, remind you that this isn't a final list because it's not. And in fact, I'd point you into the direction of the Black History Society website. That's blackhistory.ca. I'd encourage you to visit their site to learn more about these audacious individuals and their contributions. I hope you really enjoyed this special edition of the Audacious Living podcast. I'd encourage you to actually, since you're visiting websites, after you visit Black History Society, go over to bestaudaciouslife.com for more. You can check out past episodes. We've got a blog there as well. Hey, that's it for this episode. Thanks, as always, for giving us the time and checking out the program. Greatly appreciated, as always. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to others, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Dudley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.